Picture this: a wealthy widow in Suffolk, England, summer of 1939. She is convinced the strange grass-covered mounds on her property are hiding something. She hires a self-taught archaeologist. War with Nazi Germany is weeks away, and what he is about to pull from beneath that ordinary English field will rewrite 1,000 years of history. In Newfoundland, evidence of European feet on American soil, 5 centuries before Columbus. In Poland, a king's crown buried during the Black Death and forgotten for 600 years. In a Solent mudbank, a Tudor warship preserved so completely that her sailors' DNA still tells us their stories. These are not legends. Every one of them can be touched. Everyone is housed in a real museum, and every one of them breaks the picture of the medieval world we were taught in school. Today, 7 medieval archaeological discoveries that defy all explanation. The textbooks called this period the Dark Ages. The artifacts tell a very different story. We begin in a quiet field in Suffolk, England. The year is 1939. Edith Pretty, the wealthy landowner of Sutton Hoo, has hired a local archaeologist named Basil Brown to investigate a cluster of grass-covered mounds on her estate. Brown has no formal training. He works alone, with hand tools, while German bombers are weeks away from filling the British sky. What he finds beneath that earth will stop the project, summon the British Museum, and force history itself to be rewritten. Brown uncovers iron rivets, then more iron rivets, in a pattern. Then the unmistakable outline of an 86-foot ship pressed into the sand like a fossil. The wood has dissolved completely, but the soil has held the shape, plank by plank, oar port by oar port, for 1,300 years. Inside the burial chamber, a treasure unlike anything ever recovered from Anglo-Saxon England. A ceremonial helmet of iron and tinned bronze, decorated with warriors and dragons. A gold buckle weighing 430 grams, hollow, hinged, and engraved with interlocking serpents so fine that no Victorian goldsmith could match the work. Silver bowls from the Eastern Roman Empire, coins from Merovingian Gaul, and garnets. Thousands of garnets, cut and set into jewelry, sourced through trade networks from Sri Lanka and India. The man buried here, almost certainly King Raedwald of East Anglia, who died around 624 AD, was running an international supply chain when official history says England had collapsed into illiterate isolation. And here is the detail that turns the case from impressive into unforgettable. The acidic Suffolk soil dissolved his body completely. Every bone, every tooth, every fragment of the king himself, gone. We have his ship, we have his gold, we have his helmet. We have no king. The textbook explanation calls this period the Dark Ages and treats Anglo-Saxon England as a backwater. The textbook explanation was written before this mound was opened. Sutton Hoo did not just rewrite a chapter, it threw out the chapter entirely. From a Suffolk field where a king vanished into acidic soil, we move 60 miles north, to a Staffordshire cornfield, where a man with a metal detector is about to make a different kind of impossible find. And this one comes with a question no archaeologist has been able to answer. The date is July 5th, 2009. A retired handyman named Terry Herbert is sweeping a freshly plowed field with a second-hand metal detector. He has been doing this for 18 years without finding anything significant. And then his machine starts screaming. Over the next 5 days, before the professionals arrive, he pulls more than 500 pieces of gold out of the topsoil of a single acre. When the formal excavation finishes, the count is staggering. 3,500 objects, 5.5 kilograms of gold, 1.5 kilograms of silver, thousands of garnets, glittering blood red across the workbench at Birmingham Museum. It is the largest hoard of Anglo-Saxon gold ever discovered, anywhere in the world, and one of the largest gold hoards from the early medieval period, full stop. Dated to roughly 650 to 675 AD, the height of the kingdom of Mercia under its warrior kings. So far, this sounds like a treasure trove. And then the archaeologists look closer. Almost every single object in the Staffordshire hoard is military. Sword pommel caps, hilt collars, strips of helmet. Fittings ripped, twisted, and bent off the weapons they once decorated. There are no coins. There is no female jewelry. There are no domestic objects of any kind. Someone, sometime in the 7th century, sat down with a king's worth of war gold and deliberately mutilated it. Some of the gold strips are folded over on themselves. Some have been hammered flat. Whoever did this was not melting it down. They were destroying it as weapons while keeping it as gold. If you are watching this kind of story for the first time and finding it tells you more in 20 minutes than school taught you in a year, subscribe. The channel goes where the textbooks stop. Now, to a windswept coast in Newfoundland, where a Norwegian couple is about to prove that the textbooks have been wrong by 500 years. The year is 1960. The Norwegian explorer Helge Ingstad and his archaeologist wife Anne Steensen have been searching the coastline of eastern Canada for years, looking for one thing: physical proof of the medieval Norse sagas. The Vinland sagas describe Viking voyages westward to a land of grapes and timber around the year 1000 AD. For 9 centuries, those sagas have been treated as romance, beautiful literature, not history. The Ingstads believe otherwise, and on a remote stretch of Newfoundland called L'Anse aux Meadows, they find it. The remains of 8 Norse buildings, 3 large halls, 5 smaller workshops, all built in the unmistakable turf and timber style of 10th century Iceland and Greenland. A bronze-ringed pin of a design used by Norse settlers between roughly 920 and 1050. Iron nails smelted on site from local bog iron. Indigenous peoples of the region did not work iron, so this signature is unambiguously European, a spindle whorl used in textile work of Scandinavian type, carbon dated to approximately 1000 AD. Almost 500 years before Columbus stepped onto a Caribbean beach, Norse hands were forging iron in North America. And here is the detail that makes the case impossible to dismiss. In 2021, a team using a new method called the cosmic ray spike technique pinned the cutting of 3 trees at the site to a single year. The wood for the Norse buildings was felled in 1021 AD, exactly 1,000 years before the analysis was published. We do not have a vague Norse-era settlement. We have a date. We have a year. We have a discovery so precise it can be carved into a calendar. Conventional history for half a millennium told us Europe found America in 1492. Conventional history was written before someone walked the coast of Newfoundland with a careful eye. The L'Anse aux Meadows site was abandoned within a generation. The Norse, vastly outnumbered and 3,000 miles from Greenland, walked away. Why? What did they encounter? What did they fail to bring? Were there other settlements, further south, never found? The site we have answers one question and opens 20 more. From a 1,000-year-old Norse hearth in Canada, we travel back across the Atlantic and forward 5 centuries, to a July afternoon in 1545, when King Henry VIII watched his pride and joy sink with 500 men still aboard. July 19th, 1545. The Mary Rose, flagship of the English Navy, the favorite warship of King Henry VIII, is sailing out of Portsmouth Harbor to engage a French invasion fleet. King Henry is watching from Southsea Castle, a mile away. And then, in a moment no contemporary witness fully explained, the great ship heels over, takes water through her open lower gun ports, and sinks in less than a minute. Around 500 men are aboard. Roughly 35 survive. The reasons for the disaster are debated to this day. Overloading, a sudden gust, a sharp turn. Indiscipline among a crew that one Spanish witness described as the sort of knaves who would not obey orders. She vanishes into the silt of the Solent and is forgotten for 437 years. Quick aside, drop your country in the comments. I am genuinely curious how far this story has traveled. Now, in 1982, in one of the most ambitious underwater archaeology projects ever attempted, 60 million people watch live as engineers raise the Mary Rose from the seabed. What emerges from the mud is, frankly, miraculous. The anaerobic Solent silt has preserved her like nothing the sea normally returns. 19,000 artifacts, 172 intact longbows, the largest collection of Tudor longbows in existence, many of them still strung. The personal possessions of common sailors, the kind of objects historians almost never see. Leather shoes worn into the shape of individual feet. Wooden combs still containing single human hairs, dice, dominoes, surgical instruments, even a backgammon set. 9 musical instruments, 3 of which were unknown from any other source until they came up out of the mud. And the bones, the partial remains of around 179 men, many showing the deformed scapulae and twisted spines of professional archers who spent their lives hauling longbows of 150 pounds of draw weight. DNA analysis published over the last 15 years has revealed something the chronicles never recorded. The crew of the Mary Rose was not all English. Genetic and isotopic testing on the skeletons has identified men of North African, Southern European, and Middle Eastern descent serving aboard the King's flagship. One man, nicknamed Henry the Carpenter, has DNA matching modern populations from North Africa. Another, a young archer, grew up in the Western Mediterranean. Tudor England, the textbook tells us, was insular, parochial, ethnically uniform. Tudor England, the bones tell us, was running an international navy with international men. Of the cases we have walked through so far, has any one of them shifted what you thought you knew about the medieval and early modern world? Hold that thought, because the next case is going to test it harder. We move from the bottom of the English Channel to the bottom of a Norwegian burial mound, and we meet two women whose grave was so powerful that someone, decades after they were buried, broke into it just to disturb their bones. In 1904, a Norwegian farmer reports that something hard is buried under one of his fields in Vestfold, just south of Oslo. The Swedish archaeologist Gabriel Gustafsson begins to dig. What he uncovers is, quite simply, the most spectacular Viking ship ever recovered, the Oseberg ship, 70 feet long, carved from a single oak. Her prow, a coiled serpent of interlaced beasts so finely cut that the carving has been used to define an entire Viking art style, built around 820 AD, buried with two women aboard in the year 834. Inside the burial chamber, an inventory that makes other Viking graves look austere, a four-wheeled wooden cart, the only complete Viking-era cart ever found, decorated with scenes that may depict mythological narratives. 3 sledges, each more elaborate than the last. 5 carved animal head posts whose ritual purpose nobody has fully reconstructed. A loom, beds, buckets, tapestries, fragments of tapestry showing processions of figures, horses, what may be ritual scenes. And the bones, 15 horses, 6 dogs, and 2 oxen, all sacrificed, plus 2 women, one in her 70s or 80s, the other in her 50s. The older woman's DNA, recently sequenced, links her to populations in modern-day Iran. The younger woman's status remains debated: companion, attendant, possibly a sacrifice meant to accompany her mistress into the afterlife, which Arab traveler Ibn Fadlan described in disturbing detail among the Volga Vikings a century later. And here is what the textbooks struggle to absorb. Within decades of the burial, someone broke in. Not Viking-age tomb robbers looking for gold because they left gold behind. Whoever entered that chamber dragged the bodies out of their bed, scattered the bones, broke up the burial, and walked away from a fortune in jewelry and worked silver. Norwegian archaeologists who have re-examined the disturbance now believe it was a ritual political act, a deliberate destruction of the dead women's spiritual power, possibly carried out when a new dynasty came to the throne and needed to break the hold of the old one. In Viking Norway, even buried women were considered too dangerous to be left in peace. The 7th case we will reach in a moment is the one most archaeologists wish would go away. Stay with me. It is also the one with the cleanest evidence. But first, we travel from Norse Norway in the 9th century to medieval Poland in the 14th, and we open a hidden vault that someone sealed during the deadliest pandemic in European history. The town is Schroda in southwestern Poland. The year is 1985. Demolition workers tearing down an old building in the town center find gold coins in the rubble. They do not stop. The hoard is dispersed, then partially recovered, then re-excavated more carefully between 1986 and 1988. By the end of the formal excavation, the count is breathtaking. Nearly 3,000 silver coins, 39 gold coins of extraordinary rarity, and the centerpiece, a gold crown of pierced lily-shaped panels set with sapphires, garnets, and pearls, with eagles and dragons worked into the metal. The work is so refined that scholars now believe the crown was once worn by a Holy Roman Empress, most likely Blanche of Valois, the first wife of the Emperor Charles IV. So, what was an empress's crown doing buried under a townhouse in a small Silesian town? The dating tells the story. The hoard was concealed in the mid-14th century, almost certainly between 1348 and 1350, the worst years of the Black Death in Central Europe. The plague killed somewhere between 30 and 50% of the European population in those years. And as the disease swept north and east, terrified Christian communities began to blame their Jewish neighbors, accusing them of poisoning wells. Pogroms erupted across the German-speaking lands. In one city after another, Jewish communities were burned alive, expelled, or murdered. The leading scholarly interpretation today is that the Schroda treasure was the wealth of a Jewish money-lending family, possibly with the empress's crown held as collateral on an unpaid royal loan. Buried in haste as the violence approached, they never came back to dig it up. We do not know their names. We do not know how they died. We know only that they buried a king's ransom in gold expecting to return, and something terrible enough to ensure that they did not return, swept through their town within months. The textbooks describe the Black Death in terms of mortality numbers and economic consequences. They do not always describe what an empress's crown is doing, buried 6 feet under a Polish kitchen floor. The Schroda treasure is the Black Death made physical, the moment of panic, frozen in gold and gemstones, kept in the dark for 6.5 centuries. From a Polish vault sealed during a plague, we move to our final case, and the strangest of the 7, because the next hoard, found just over a decade ago, contains objects that should not be in the same hole in the ground. Items from at least 4 different cultures, items from 3 continents, items separated by 1,000 years and 10,000 miles, all wrapped together and buried in a Scottish church field in the year 900. The date is September 2014. A retired businessman named Derek McLennan is metal detecting on Church of Scotland land in Galloway, in southwestern Scotland, with permission. His detector signals. He digs, and he uncovers what is now considered the richest, most varied Viking Age hoard ever found in the British Isles. The Galloway hoard is an archaeological puzzle box. The upper layer, the easiest to read, is classic Viking silver, arm rings, hack silver, a small Anglo-Saxon cross of silver. Beneath it, in a separate package, is something else entirely. A vessel of silver and gilt, originally manufactured in the Sasanian Empire of Persia, or in the early Islamic world, dated to roughly the 6th or 7th century, already 300 years old when it was buried in Scotland. Wrapped around the vessel, fragments of silk that originated somewhere between Constantinople and Central Asia. Inside the vessel, an inventory that is hard to make sense of, a rock crystal jar engraved with the Latin name of a bishop, Bishop Haegwald, who is otherwise lost to history, gold and silver brooches in Anglo-Saxon style, a small gold bird, beads of glass, amber, and rock crystal, and packets of dirt, hair, and what appear to be relic fragments, carefully wrapped and labeled with cords. Researchers at National Museum Scotland, who have been studying the hoard for over a decade, now describe it as something closer to a cultural reliquary than a thief's stash. Someone gathered objects of spiritual or symbolic value from across the known world: Persia, Byzantium, the Carolingian continent, Anglo-Saxon England, Ireland, Norse Scandinavia, and buried them together in layered packages in a remote Scottish field at a moment when Viking raids were tearing through the British Isles. Whoever they were, they had access to a trade and pilgrimage network stretching from Iran to Ireland, and they expected to come back. And, like the family in Schroda, they did not. The textbooks describe early medieval Scotland as a peripheral, isolated frontier. The Galloway hoard, 3 continents, 4 cultures, 1,000 years of objects, all in one 9th century hole, describes something completely different. Whoever buried this was not on the edge of the world. They were in the middle of it. 7 discoveries, 7 museums, 7 moments where the medieval period reached up out of the ground and contradicted the textbook in our hands. A king who left no body but left an international fortune. An army's worth of war gold, deliberately mutilated and abandoned. Norse hearths in North America, 5 centuries before Columbus. A Tudor flagship crewed by men from 3 continents. 2 women buried with such power that the next generation broke in to disturb their bones. An empress's crown sealed under a Polish kitchen as the plague approached. a Scottish hoard containing objects from a world that medieval Europe was not supposed to be touching. The pattern across all 7 is the same. Every one of these finds is younger than our textbooks. The object came first. The story we tell about it is still catching up. The medieval world was not dark. It was networked, mobile, multilingual, violent, devout, plague-haunted, and far more strange than the curriculum admits. Each of these 7